What if I told you that the greatest threat to our freedom isn't political tyranny, nor technological manipulation, but something far more subtle? The fading of our ability to question. Because the moment we stop asking, someone else begins answering for us. In this video we'll explore how critical thinking, that force that gave birth to philosophy, science, even democracy, is slowly disappearing. And you'll come to understand why this decline isn't just cultural, but psychological, shaping the world you inhabit every single day. Think about it. When was the last time you doubted something that seemed obvious? How often have you shared a news article, liked an opinion, or defended an idea without truly reflecting on it? Perhaps the problem isn't merely that we've stopped asking questions, but that somewhere someone has already figured out how to profit from our lack of inquiry. Questioning is uncomfortable. It doesn't bring peace, it brings unease. It demands that we let go of comforting certainties, confront our own illusions, and learn to live with doubt instead of seeking absolute answers. Socrates wasn't condemned to death for being physically dangerous. He was condemned for daring to disrupt the city's fragile sense of order. He unsettled because he asked what no one wanted to answer: what is justice? What is virtue? What is truth? Centuries later, it seems we're still running from the same questions. We crave quick answers, catchy slogans, sound bites that feel convincing but carry no depth. Modern life has turned the act of questioning into a social risk. Those who question too much make others uncomfortable. Those who doubt get in the way. Those who criticize are excluded. We live in a paradox. In the so-called age of free expression, doubt has become a threat. Asking questions is no longer about seeking clarity, it's about aligning with the collective chorus. The logic is simple. It's safer to repeat than to question, more comfortable to conform than to think. And what does this produce? A society that doesn't discuss but echoes. A world where memes replace arguments and headlines replace investigation. We've created a culture of haste, where thinking deeply seems like a waste of time. The result is a silent impoverishment. Not of technology, not of the economy, but of the human spirit. We've lost the habit of skepticism, of analysis, of looking beyond the surface. Critique has become irrelevant in the face of an avalanche of information that demands only a quick reaction. Like, share, cancel. Nietzsche said, "Convictions are more dangerous enemies of truth than lies." Because a liar can still be exposed, but someone who blindly clings to their own certainties closes themselves off to dialogue. Today we live surrounded by fragile convictions, defended with fury but rarely examined with calm. And this comes at a cost. The death of questioning weakens not only our individual intelligence, but our very democracy, our relationships, even our mental health. Without doubt there is no growth. Without critique there is no evolution. Without questioning there is no freedom. Yet perhaps the darkest aspect is this: if we stop thinking, someone else keeps thinking for us. If we abandon the questions, someone else manufactures the answers. And this is where something even more unsettling emerges. The disappearance of critical thought is not merely an accident of history, it is a strategy. Because a people who do not question are a people easy to control. Which brings us to the next unavoidable question. In a world where we have more information than ever before, why does it seem that instead of growing wiser, we are becoming ever more ignorant? We live in the most connected era in human history. With a single tap on a screen, we can access entire libraries, consult philosophers from millennia past, watch lectures from the world's top universities, listen to experts on the other side of the globe. Never before has humanity been so close to knowledge. And yet, never have we been so lost. This is the cruel paradox of modernity. The more information we accumulate, the less wisdom seems to emerge. We are surrounded by data, yet starved for understanding. We swim in an ocean of content, but we thirst for meaning. Sociologist Zygmunt Bauman called our time liquid modernity, a world where everything is fluid, unstable, and ephemeral. Truth, once solid as rock, now dissolves into narratives that shift with the winds. Today it seems less about what is true and more about what is shareable. The problem isn't a lack of information, it's an excess of it. When everything is available, nothing feels important. The mind becomes overloaded, loses its filters, confuses volume with relevance. The result is a paradoxical phenomenon. Hyperinformation breeds ignorance. A simple example, when you search for something on Google, you get thousands of results in seconds. But this abundance doesn't enlighten, it confuses. It's like entering a library where every book is shouting at once. The noise drowns out meaning. And in the midst of this chaos, algorithms decide for you. They determine what you read, what you see, what you believe. You may think you're choosing, but in reality you're being guided. And because these algorithms aren't designed to feed your wisdom, but to capture your attention, what they offer isn't depth, but stimulation. Not reflection, but addiction. Too much information doesn't create clarity, it creates paralysis. Psychologists call it cognitive overload. A saturated mind loses the ability to distinguish what matters from what doesn't. And in this fertile ground, misinformation thrives. It has never been easier to spread lies. A sensationalist headline can circle the globe in seconds, while serious investigative work takes days, months, even years to unfold. Lies travel by rocket, truth comes by bicycle. The human brain, overloaded, prefers to believe what is simple, fast, and emotional. And so, the information age becomes an age of manipulation. Philosopher Jean Baudrillard anticipated this when he spoke of the era of simulation. We live surrounded by representations that no longer point to reality, but only to other representations. News ceases to inform and begins to perform. It is no longer about describing the world, but about capturing attention. Here lies a chilling detail. The more we believe we are informed, the less we feel the need to question. Because information is not knowledge, and knowledge is not wisdom. What we see today is an epidemic of fragile certainties. People who skim a handful of posts believe they have discovered the essence of politics, science, life itself. A 30-second video replaces years of study. A meme becomes an argument. Ignorance wears the mask of erudition. And yet, when everything seems known, nothing is truly understood. The result is a generation with access to all the answers, yet who has forgotten how to ask questions. But if an overload of information makes us ignorant, why do so many choose illusion over clarity? The answer may lie in something even deeper, the psychology of stupidity. When we hear the word stupidity, we usually associate it with a lack of intelligence. But perhaps it is something deeper, more dangerous, and profoundly human. Stupidity is born not just from a lack of reasoning, but from a fear of thinking. Theologian and philosopher Dietrich Bonhoeffer, imprisoned by the Nazis during World War II, wrote a striking reflection. He believed that stupidity was more dangerous than evil. Evil, he said, can be confronted, exposed, punished. But stupidity is immune. The stupid do not argue, do not reflect, do not question. They only repeat. They need no evidence because they thrive on the conviction of the group. And a society of the stupid becomes fertile ground for any tyranny. Jung would say this phenomenon is linked to the collective shadow. When people gather en masse, they cease to be individuals. Moral responsibility dissolves into the crowd. What would be unthinkable for an isolated individual becomes natural for the group. Man who alone might reflect in a mass becomes an echo. Social psychology confirms this. Classic experiments like Solomon Asch's showed that just a little peer pressure can make a person deny even what their own eyes see. Faced with the risk of exclusion, we choose the collective lie over solitary truth. This mechanism now plays out on a massive scale. Social media has turned the human need for belonging into a commodity. Likes, followers, and instant approval act as psychological rewards. Our minds, wired to seek acceptance, sacrifice critical thinking for a fleeting relief. The relief of being accepted. This is why so many prefer to echo what's already popular rather than risk a new idea. Thinking differently hurts. Questioning is exhausting. And deep down, stupidity offers an easier path, the comfort of certainty. Psychoanalyst Wilfred Bion said that the group often functions as an anesthetic for thought. Rather than confronting the pain of doubt, the collective provides ready-made narratives, quick answers, and comforting slogans. The individual, avoiding the anguish of uncertainty, takes refuge in this anesthesia. And here's the point: stupidity isn't the absence of thought, it is the flight from thought. We see it reflected in everyday life. Someone shares an absurd theory simply because everyone around them believes it. A person stays silent in the face of injustice, fearing exclusion. A group fiercely defends a conviction without even examining its contradictions. The fear of rejection, the desire for belonging, and the anxiety provoked by the chaos of the world create the perfect psychological soil for stupidity to flourish. And here's the most unsettling question. If stupidity is a collective defense mechanism, then it is not an accident but an unconscious choice. It's easier to be stupid in a group than lucid alone. But if we choose, even unconsciously, The anesthesia of ignorance, what do we gain from it? Who benefits from our refusal to think? Perhaps the answer lies less in the individual and more in the system we live in. Because wherever there is mass stupidity, there is almost always someone profiting from it. Stupidity is not just a psychological or cultural phenomenon. Above all, it is a product. And like any product, it has consumers, suppliers, and most importantly, beneficiaries. We live in an era where distraction has become the most valuable resource on the planet. The world's largest companies don't just sell products or services. They sell attention. Your screen time, your capacity to stay engaged, your emotional reactions, all of it has been turned into capital. Here's the catch. The less critical you are, the more predictable you become. The less you question, the more easily you can be manipulated. Ignorance isn't a flaw for the market, it's a competitive advantage. Philosopher Guy Debord, in The Society of the Spectacle, foresaw this logic. He described a world where reality is no longer lived directly but consumed as an image. It doesn't matter what something is but how it appears. The spectacle doesn't want reflective citizens, it wants obedient consumers. People who don't question the nature of what they see, but only desire more. Take social media. They are not spaces for debate but showcases of desire. Everything is designed to capture your attention and turn it into profit. And because doubt takes time and critical thinking slows consumption, the system rewards haste, superficiality, impulse. The philosophical question why is replaced by the immediate click of buy now. Advertising discovered this long before the internet. It doesn't just sell products, it sells narratives. You don't buy a piece of clothing, you buy status. You don't buy a car, you buy identity. You don't buy a smartphone, you buy belonging. The market doesn't need you to think, it needs you to feel. And what is the cheapest raw material for manipulating feelings? Stupidity. Because it's content with symbols, slogans, and simplifications. It demands no evidence, only stimulation. But it's not just corporations that benefit from the absence of critical thinking. Governments have also recognized the value of distraction. A people who do not think is a people who do not protest. A people who do not doubt is a people who obey. George Orwell imagined, in 1984, a regime that ruled through total surveillance and overt censorship. But perhaps what we experience today is even more sophisticated. There's no need to ban books if no one has the patience to read them. No need to destroy ideas if they can be buried under an avalanche of memes. Control doesn't come through forced silence, but through relentless noise. In this context, stupidity becomes not only tolerated but cultivated. The more distracted we are, the easier it is to sell us illusions. And here comes the uncomfortable realization. The world isn't becoming stupid by accident. There is an industry behind our distraction. And like any industry, it has consequences, not just in the market but in the soul. The death of critical thinking is not only a political or economic problem. It corrodes our inner life, destroys our capacity for choice, and weakens our humanity. But what happens when this manufactured ignorance stops being merely a cultural condition and starts directly affecting people's emotional and social health? What happens when not thinking comes at a cost? The lack of critical thinking is not an abstract problem. It has concrete, profound, and painful consequences. When a society stops questioning, it begins to fall ill. And this illness manifests both in the collective sphere and in the heart of each individual. Consider how we live today, surrounded by information, yet unable to discern what is true. Manipulated by political narratives that exploit our most primal fears. Seduced by easy promises of happiness, success, and belonging. The result is a diffuse sense of emptiness, a malaise we cannot name, yet that quietly accompanies us. Psychiatrist Viktor Frankl said that human beings suffer not only when they feel pain, but above all when they cannot find meaning in that pain. And perhaps this is what we are experiencing en masse. A lack of meaning born from our inability to reflect, to ask questions, to look beyond the surface. Without critical thinking, we fall into the traps of immediacy, constant comparison, and emotional dependence on the opinions of others. The cost is psychological. Anxiety and depression soar when we live at the mercy of narratives we did not choose. Existential emptiness becomes the backdrop of modern life. Instead of reflecting on who we are, we fill our minds with distractions that only deepen the abyss. The cost is social. Relationships fragment because we no longer know how to converse. We live in bubbles of opinion, where difference is seen as a threat rather than an opportunity for growth. Families fracture over political beliefs, friendships break over trivial disagreements, and the public sphere is reduced to a battlefield of shallow certainties. And the cost is political. When a population stops thinking critically, it becomes vulnerable to manipulation. History is full of societies seduced by leaders offering simple answers to complex problems. Collective stupidity creates fertile ground for authoritarianism. But perhaps the highest cost is spiritual, not in a religious sense but existential. Critical thinking is what allows us to look inward, to question our masks, to confront our illusions. Without it, we live as strangers in our own minds. We follow scripts we didn't write, adopt values we didn't choose, carry burdens we don't understand. It is the slow death of authenticity. And if we continue this way, what is at stake is not just the death of critique but the death of freedom itself. Because being free is not about doing what we want, it is about understanding why we want what we want. It is about having clarity over our own thoughts, not merely echoing the thoughts of others. Nietzsche warned that he who has a why to live can bear almost any how. But when the why disappears, any how enslaves us. And this is what we see today, a generation lost among distractions, living without direction, trapped in invisible networks it feeds itself. Yet if this is the price of collective stupidity, an inevitable question arises. Is there a way out? Can critical thinking be revived in an era seemingly designed to bury it? If we have come this far, perhaps one question remains unavoidable. Is there hope? Can we resurrect critical thought in a time when everything seems conspiring against it? The answer does not lie in grand collective revolutions, at least not at first. Critical thinking has always been born in the intimacy of the individual. It was so with Socrates, walking the streets of Athens, unsettling young people and politicians alike with his questions. It was so with Descartes, isolated in his cold room, doubting every certainty until he reached the famous, "I think, therefore I am." It always begins with a solitary act of courage, the courage to think for oneself. Perhaps this is what we lack, courage. The courage to endure silence in a world of noise. The courage to doubt the obvious when everyone applauds. The courage to feel alone when the crowd offers belonging in exchange for submission. Reviving critical thinking is not merely an intellectual exercise, it is an act of existential rebellion. It is refusing to be manipulated by haste, fear, or comfort. It is cultivating a mind that will not settle for easy answers. And this requires simple, yet revolutionary practices. Read deeply in an age of superficiality. Ask why, when everyone seems content with how. Doubt your own certainties, not just those of others. Create spaces of silence, because without silence there is no thought, only reaction. Viktor Frankl reminded us that between stimulus and response there is a space, and within that space lies our freedom. Critical thinking is precisely this expanded space, the ability not to react immediately but to reflect. It is the pause that restores our humanity. But we must acknowledge, reviving critical thinking comes at a cost. It isolates us, makes us uncomfortable, pulls us from the comfort of conformity. Thinking for oneself is to risk being misunderstood, rejected, ridiculed. And yet, it is also the only path to an authentic life. Socrates said that an unexamined life is not worth living. Today, perhaps we can say, a society without examination is not worthy of being called free. And so, we return to the initial question. If intelligence is what separates us from animals, why do we seem to grow ever more foolish? Perhaps it is because we have abandoned precisely what made us human: doubt, questioning, restlessness. And here I leave you with a provocation. If the whole world is marching toward collective stupidity, perhaps thinking critically is today the greatest act of rebellion. And, at the same time, the last gesture of love for the truth. If this video made you pause and reflect, maybe it's because a part of you needed to hear it. Don't let this reflection get lost in the noise of the world. Subscribe to the channel to continue exploring the paradoxes that make us human, and to catch the next episodes that will challenge your mind, question your certainties, and illuminate the deepest corners of existence. Because we are only just beginning to unravel the dilemmas of our own minds.